Welcome to Amadon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amadon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today on episode 81 of the podcast is Dan Antoine. Now, Dan is the director of programs for Ingham, Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camps. You may have heard me talk about Okoboji in previous episodes of this podcast. I believe when we had Nancy Bartelt on a couple times, we talked about going to camp because we would go to camp together. But then also we talked about it in the episode with Eric George, where we talked about this like year of discipleship and kind of, teaching our kids how to be adults. Because some of the experiences we had with our camp counselors when we would go to family camp at Okoboji kind of pointed me this idea of a year of discipleship, or a year of kind of transitioning into adulthood and basically being intentional about a teaching of kind of steps to get into that process. Anyway, lots of influence from going to this Ingham Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camps. And Dan has been like the figurehead that we see every time we go to camp, because the counselors, they kind of turn over. There's some constants. There are some constants at camp, but Dan's always been there, and Dan is like the worship leader, but he's the director of programs, and so you see him all the time, and you see like kind of like what he's in charge of, and this kind of environment that he's in charge of kind of creating, and knowing what that environment has done for my family and my children, and seeing the people that work there, and actually having family that has worked there. It's a special place. And so, there's teaching going on there. And so wanting to like have a conversation about teaching and seeing the parallels between what he does as a director of programs at a Bible camp and what I do as a teacher of teachers here at the University of Mississippi. And Amadon Planet is all about learning how to teach better. And I just want to have a conversation like, hey, what secret sauce have you figured out? And, how could I bring some of that into what I do here? And again, learning how to teach better doesn't have to always come from, and that's the lesson that we've seen in this podcast over and over again, doesn't have to come from formal education spaces that are, there's lots to learn there, but there's lots to learn from other spaces as well. And so, but Dan's also, what I learned in this episode is Dan's also a trained teacher, a trained elementary teacher. Did not know that, which is, again, another reason why to have this podcast. Is an excuse to have good conversations with fun people. And Dan shares a lot of great golden nuggets in this podcast episode. I'm excited to share it with you. Also, too, there'll be links at the end in the show notes for this episode if you're interested in learning more about Ingham Okoboji and what they do at their camps and all the different programs that they have, opportunities. Not only opportunities to attend, but it may be opportunities to get a job. Talk about at the end of the episode where, I point to a lot of my experiences working in camp type environments and training me, helping me gain some confidence as a teacher, and some of the unpredictableness that can happen with in those environments can help you like roll with the punches when you're teaching in a formal school environment. Anyway, I'm excited to share this episode. I'm excited to share this conversation. I was excited to have this conversation, and hopefully that excitement comes through into your ears as you listen to what we're about to share. So without further delay, here is my conversation with Dan Antoine, Director of Programs for Ingham Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camps up in Iowa. Welcome to Amadon Planet, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing really great. We're doing well up here in northern Iowa, and it's a chilly week ahead of us, but it is November after all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and Dan Antoine, so the director of programs at Ingham Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camp, up in what I say is the Great Lakes of Iowa.
Right. Yeah. Because Iowa only has a few lakes. Minnesota, to our north has 10,000 or more. Yeah. We got a few, and 5 of them are right here in the Okoboji area.
Yeah. When I tell people about going to family camp in the summer, I'm like, you hit the corn and you keep going and you keep going. And then when you think you have gone far enough, you keep going a little bit further. And there it is. It just opens up and you get to Okoboji, you get yourself a Scooter's coffee, and then head down, which was amazing. Actually, this is I didn't tell you this. There's a Scooter's Coffee in Madison, Wisconsin. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to get, the big joke with the family, like, I'm going to go get a scooters, and like that, like, roll up to the drive-through and say, hey, give me a large scooters. And then like, you're not funny at all. Old man, stop it. But I was like so excited. I saw scooters in Madison, Wisconsin. Anyway, that's not why we're here to talk about Scooters Coffee. So, as we were saying before, we hit the record button, like, I'm just seeing, so I've known you. I can't remember how. Like, I've known you since I was at Madison, Wisconsin. So that was what, maybe 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And seeing you and how you operate. You were kind of the main figurehead of the family camps that we would go to, and seeing what you're with groups of counselors that are turning over, and junior counselors become counselors become what, head counselor? What's the proper title?
Program
directors. Yeah. And just seeing how you are, kind of dealing with all of that, and seeing some of that, and then seeing some of the parallels with what we're doing here, like at the University of Mississippi, in training up teachers, and thinking about trying to keep some sort of, like, we have a DNA for what we do, but then there's constant turnover, and there's like bringing in new people, and trying to like say, hey, here's what it means to be a counselor. Here's what it means to be a teacher. And so wanting just to have a discussion and thinking about, well, what is it like to be in that role, and see what it's, maybe we could have a little back and forth about thinking about how we can be better at what we do. So that was kind of the main thoughts for having this conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny you mentioned the timing, because I was a counselor here after my freshman year of college back in the summer of 2002. And wow. So I ended up doing it all 4 years of college. I'm an education major myself.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have a lot of other needs in the summertime. So it worked out great. I grew up going to a different camp and loved it. So working at camp in the summers was super beneficial for me. It was really fun, and I love the opportunity that it gave me to grow as a person and as a leader. And really, those summers and my years in campus organizational ministry at college really helped form me. But it is kind of funny because I've been here now year round since 2005 in the fall, and wow. And I keep getting older, but the counselors don't. They're always they stay the same age. So. It's a unique environment.
Yeah, that is true. I like my cultural references. Well, Top Gun now got refreshed, so that was good. But otherwise, the things I'm mentioning to them, like when I first started teaching, like that was when they were born, and I was like, that's not going to work anymore.
Yeah, there was a point not too long ago where I realized that I've been working here longer than most of the campers have been alive, but now. That's true of the staff. It's a little crazy.
Exactly.
So,
and well, I guess let's just go back a little bit. So like, what kind of education major were you? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. So I went into elementary education, and it's funny because I loved school. I'm one of those weirdo nerd people. But no, I just really enjoyed school, but there's something about some of the opportunities I had as like a junior and senior in high school, with mentoring, even with helping my peers with their homework. There were just a lot of moments where my gifts for teaching were affirmed by others. Not talking about career, just, wow, I wish our teacher would explain it this way. And now I understand it. And I remember doing my student teaching, and I had a gal in a 7th grade math class. And she, at the end of the year, gave me a card. And I still remember it. And she just said, "Thank you so much for being my teacher this year. I got a B. That's the best grade I've ever got in math. And my parents are so proud of me. And I finally feel like I start to understand it." And I was like, that's why I went into teaching.
Yeah. So, that's awesome. Yeah. I call that getting paid. That's big. That's like a big check that you got put in front of you. Like, that's awesome.
I still remember it 20 years later.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and we have another podcast. We could just start recording that. We call it The Road to Better Teaching, where we talk about your mile markers on, like, we tell stories of professional development, and like, there you go. There's your moment right there.
That's it.
So that's interesting. I mean, so like, and I think back to my own story too, like similar thing. I was a boys' state counselor, and that's where, I was surrounded by a lot of teachers, because a lot of, teachers or, administrators who had summers off, they were able to take a week off to be a Boys State counselor, and just being affirmed that way, the same way. Like, I was a computer science major and then a math major, and I was like this, applied math, engineering, and physics major. And it was like, and they're like, getting that affirmed, like, hey, have you ever thought about teaching? And I'm like, huh, yeah. And then like, hey, 20 years later, here we go. So, yeah, that works out. So that goes, so you talked about being a good student and that kind of leading, good student and liking school and leading to an education major. So like, and this goes into some of the things that I'm seeing as a teacher. Sometimes we get folks that they loved school and they like, man, I would, want to be a teacher. And sometimes it's like, well, thinking like they're basically kind of repeating their own experience, or they're they're teaching themselves too. Like that they see like the students in the classroom are just copies of themselves. So like that was like my kind of my main question for like thinking about the great, camper, right? The person that attends a camp and they're really into it and they're enthusiastic about everything. And how do you help them transition into counselor? Like, and because that's something we try to think about as teachers. I that great student. How do you think about like, kind of stepping behind the desk and becoming the teacher? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you look for people that can make that transition? I guess there's a lot there.
Right. Yeah. There is a lot there. And I would say it all just starts with planting the seeds. It all starts with affirming gifts that you see. And how often did great teachers come out of having a great teacher or having someone that said, you would be really good at this, and that just sticks. That kind of affirmation sticks. And so at camp, we have campers who come from our youth camps, from our family camps, from even our day camps, which is more geared for younger kids. But we have staff apply that said, your counselors came to my church when I was a kid and did our vacation Bible school. And, I always wanted to be one of them.
Yeah.
So, the biggest thing is it starts with just affirming that idea in them, just saying, hey, one day you could do this. And to hear a counselor that you really respect, just say that to you as a kid, no matter what age of a kid you are.
Yeah.
That means something. And so it also just gets the idea, because a lot of times I think people just have the consumer mentality where it's like, I'm in this for my experience, but they don't even think like, oh, I could do that. In fact, that was my story for this year-round role at camp. Like I did this summer camp counselor thing.
Yeah.
But when I was a senior in college, the camp called me and invited me to consider working year-round at the camp. And I kind of like, I must have known intuitively that there were year-round camp staff, but it didn't even dawn on me that would be a career that I could pursue or that I would choose or anything. And so I really felt like that call, and in every sense of the word, was a big part of affirming me. So I think the first thing to like help campers think about being counselors is that affirmation in the first place, invitation. There's a lot of other ways. I was gonna say there's a lot of other ways that we equip staff, once they get here. But yeah.
Well, so I guess too, like, are you constantly talking to your current counselors about? I mean, because there's a time limit. I mean, for most of them, except for you, there's a time limit where eventually that they're going to move on, and to be like, hey, you're thinking about who's going to be following you. Like, do you have that sort of mindset with your counselors?
100%. Yep, absolutely. I mean, the reality is that we probably have an average of a 2-year stint with our staff. There's several that just do it in summer. That's all they can do, or the program they're in at college, they really do actually have to get an internship in the summer, and so they might have one summer with us. But there's a lot that do 2 summers. For the most part, it's like if you get here one summer and you experience it, most of the time staff are saying, I want to come back. Sometimes it doesn't work, but they want to. And then we have a number of people that come 3 or 4 summers and kind of average it all out. So I would say average, we have a 2 summer return, for the staff, which is pretty amazing. But So a lot of our campers come out of that. A lot of our staff come out of the camper system.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, always seeing. In fact, a lot of the staff that I interview from that position, I ask them, why do you want to work at camp? And they're like, I loved my time at camp. I loved my counselors, and I want to have the same impact on others that they had on me. I mean, that's just a really common response, and it's so great to hear. But we also get a lot of counselors from our former staff, like those that just worked here this last summer. They go back, they invite their friends or their younger siblings or their cousins or other people from their church or whatever, campus ministry, and kind of keep the system moving. So I always say that, I always tell our staff directly, you are the best recruiters for the camp, because I could go and stand on a college campus and have a display table, which I do also. And I could see 1,000 college students walk by, and honestly, I wouldn't know a single one of them. I wouldn't know which ones would make good camp counselors. I wouldn't know. I know what it takes to be a good camp counselor. I just don't know any of these people. But the staff who have worked here that are on those campuses, they are in the position to play matchmaker. Yeah. They know what it takes to be a good counselor, and they can identify that in their friends or their peers, I should say, and say, hey, find those people and encourage them to come. You got a guy that loves leading worship at your campus. Maybe you don't really know him that well, but you should just plant the seed and say, man, we have worship at camp. You'd love it there. You'd be able to help lead all summer long. Yeah. So that's another huge part of it. Yeah.
I think that's something we don't do enough of as well from an education standpoint too, of like, thinking about our former, students, especially those in like a secondary place, like thinking about, who are those students out there that have these gifts and things. Like, for example, I mean, he won't listen to this anyway. My son is a really good teacher. Like he can, like I've seen him in multiple avenues. Like just if you gave him, 10 minutes in the lesson for the kids ministry thing, I mean, he would rock it. Yeah, kids would have a great time. They would get the message. You wouldn't, you'd be right on it. He's a great, someone's trying to get some math stuff going, or if he's like leading some speech and debate stuff. Great. And just, I don't know, like it's other than me saying, hey, have you ever thought about education? But versus like a teacher saying, hey, you've got some gifts here. And like the I see in you sort of statements.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And like, for teachers, unfortunately that almost has to happen during the schooling years of the, middle and high school years where you affirm that, because then by the time, if they're choosing college, they're, maybe there's a year where they're undecided, but for the most part, you kind of go into college with a path.
Right. Yeah.
And so like the time for affirming that for teachers and students is that, high school window when they're thinking about career path. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess that must be a satisfying part of your job too, is like seeing kids like exercise these spiritual gifts that they have, and like being able to, like, maybe you've seen them light up a little bit, like, hey, I haven't had an avenue to use these before. And like, whoa, this is kind of amazing.
That's exactly right. Well, I mean, this is kind of even moving the conversation forward to what I mentioned about the staff training and equipping stuff. But there are so many people who come on board on staff. They apply, they say yes. I mean, so we're already selected them.
Right.
And they get to camp and we're on like day 1 or 2 of training. And I bet I have this conversation 3 or 4 times with 3 or 4 different people every year. And they say, I don't think I can do this. Huh. They're like, and what they mean most of the time is, I look around and I see all these people who seem to have it all together, or they know more than I do, or they're better at skits, or they're better at speaking in front of the people, or they're not nervous, or they, and I just don't feel like I have it all together. And I said, well, first of all, I'll tell you a secret. Nobody here has it all together. Yeah. Yes, some people are gifted at skits. That's just the way it is. And they may struggle with one-on-one conversations because they don't know how to listen, and you might thrive in that environment. And I said, plus we're just at the beginning of training, and this training is set to equip you to feel ready to have the tools, to have the skills, to have the mindset to know what's coming up. Right now you just said yes to a whole summer and you really don't know what it all entails. A little bit, what camp is like probably, but you're still, it's understandable that you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now, but just press through the training. And so many times they just like you said, they light up or they open up because they find the places where they really do shine. And camp is amazing because you have so many opportunities for people's gifts to shine in their passions, from active games to music to teaching to interpersonal, relationships or reflection times or whatever. I mean, there's such a variety, crafts and waterfront stuff. So it's a great place to watch people's gifts show up, and then you affirm those gifts. Yeah.
Because I imagine too, like part of it is, hey, there's going to be a kid that shows up that's just like you, like that you're going to connect with, and they're maybe having the same doubts, or that they're kind of wired the same way you are, and like you have a chance to really, make their camp experience better.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you kind of touched on this with coaching folks up, but and you're in a position where you're not just dealing with the counselor, you're dealing probably with the program directors too. So like those that are kind of the teachers of the teachers, like what I think of, thinking of like that second level. So how do you work with them? Like how are you, helping them improve, throughout a summer, from summer to summer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first things that we do, even just hearkening back to the question about the transition from camper to counselor, how do you make that switch or that? And I think one of the first things that we try to impress upon all of our staff when they come on board is a mantra that has been around longer than I have. And that mantra is see the need, meet the need. And it's super simple, but really the biggest change from camper to counselor is not just skills or knowledge, it's attitude. And really it's a servant attitude. So at camp, this is one of our biggest emphases in training, is trying to help staff adopt this servant mentality. Most kind-hearted people will, if they are told about a need, they will do something to meet the need. Or if they see the need, they will meet. If they see the wrapper on the ground, they'll pick it up. Or if someone asks them to do something, they'll do it. But our challenge is actually, no, see the need. First of all, open your eyes, notice the way campers are reacting, listen, for their heart and their stories, pay attention to the physical needs and the safety needs around you. Look for ways to help, to serve, to show love. So that's one of the biggest coaching pieces we give right off the bat for every staff member. And that's honestly where I would say campers make the switch to counselors, is when they're able to see that mantra and adopt it as their own and say, hey, how can I serve now? It's not about me. When we're playing this game, the goal of the game is not for me to win anymore or to be the center of attention. The goal of this game is for campers to have fun. And if I have to lose for that to happen, so be it. If I have to sit on the sideline with the camper that's not in it, so be it. If whatever it takes, it's not about you, it's about serving others. And that, honestly, I don't want to say that takes care of a whole bunch of other things, but it really does. Yeah, it really does.
I think I saw the last time we were there was a large dodgeball game. Yeah. No. The game with the big, the can at the other end too. You could jailbreak everybody or whatever. But yeah, so the big dodgeball game in the big field. And I saw that in action. I think you joined us. That was big. Hey, Dan's playing. And I think I saw that in action, seeing, you could see some counselors changing the way they were playing, because I'm like, they're a good player, they're a pretty good player. But then all of a sudden, they're just adjusting just a little bit so that, making sure that, hey, this is a fun thing. It's not just oh, we're getting dominated by the counselor.
Yes.
All the time. Good. And then
It's in dodgeball, it's getting the ball, and sure, I could probably pelt that, 11-year-old on the other side.
That's right.
But I give my ball to the 11-year-old on my side, so they can have a chance to throw it.
Take this. Yeah, go. Yeah, you get him.
Go get him. Go get him. Yep.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got your 10,000 hours of dodgeball. Like I could peg that guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it's not about that. It's not about people going, "Whoa, Dan's really good." It's like, no, it's about this kid next to me more than anything.
That's right. Go ahead. Keep going.
I'll just say just kind of moving on though from coaching. And you talked about like some of the leadership staff. We do 3 weeks of staff training. That's a lot. Yeah. The first week is just our leadership staff. So we have on-site program directors, and then we also have, teams of counselors that go and do day camps every week. So we have day camp leaders. We have some other like support staff that are coordinators for junior counselors and rec fund and things like that. So we do a week with just leadership staff, and a lot of that is centered on how do you coach the counselors. So that one of the biggest things that we talk about is, like you mentioned right away, it's all about relationship. I mean, really, like if you're on a power trip and you're just trying to get your way, or you think people should listen to you because of your position, well, guess what? They're probably not going to listen as much. They may follow your orders, but nobody enjoys that and nobody feels built up. But if they trust you, and if our leaders have that servant mentality, then it makes all the difference. If our counselors know that our leaders are for them. In fact, we actually do a training where we talk about leadership, and we show like an upside down pyramid. Most organizational charts have like, the executive, and then the managers, and then the down at the bottom, the grunts, and that's how it feels, that's how it feels. And the grunts are working their way up. Well, we actually flipped that upside down, mostly because Jesus did. He said, whoever among you would be the greatest must be the least and be a servant of all. And so we kind of say that too. It's like a really good leader supports and lifts up their counselors. If you think of them as the front line of ministry, then everything that you do is not so much about leadership as in terms of authority. It's about supporting and encouraging them in their roles. Yeah. And so that's really like the job, even though we have this leadership title, really it's a support role. Right. You're not better. You're not, we didn't pick you because you're a better person or even a better counselor, but we feel that you had gifts to lead. And so we want you to be using your gifts and encourage the counselors to be using theirs. If the counselors feel like you are supporting and encouraging and equipping them, they are going to thrive. Yeah. And then the ministry to the campers is going to be 100 times better. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest like mindset shifts that we work through in our leadership training.
Yeah, especially when you talk about the idea of like this idea of see the need, meet the need. Like you like can't be like, hey, here's all these needs. Like you're not seeing them because you're with every family. You're not with every counselor or camper. Like, you can't just call on the walkie-talkie. Like, hey, meet these needs. Like you don't know, because that's what, it has to be that way. And then also too, I love that you're talking about like, we have the greatest example with Jesus. And like, I always talk about like, we do a lot of education research, and a lot of times we're coming up with like, hey, work in groups, use context, like, like let people struggle a little bit, like help, like, hey, it took 2,000 years for us to figure out like, hey, he's a pretty good example.
He actually knew some things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, even what you said, something about making mistakes, like that's one of our biggest things is like, there's a lot of room for failure at camp, not in the big macro ways. We have our system set up here. It's really hard to do that. You have to try almost, but like, so you give a share up front with people, and it's not, Billy Graham. Okay. No problem. Okay. Like, but you're trying it, you're doing it, and you're supported in it. And it's just one of the most, I think, nurturing environments for trying new things. Okay, so maybe you didn't do theater in high school, and here you're in a skit. It's way out of your comfort zone. And guess what? There are people that love this stuff, and they help, and they kind of carry the skit, and you're along for the ride. Or like music is a good example. So I lead our worship band at Okoboji, and like I could lead with just myself and a guitar. Okay, it would be fine.
Yeah.
It would be better if other people joined and added a keyboard and drums and other singers and a bass guitar and whatever. And, it's okay if they're not an all-star keyboard player. I want to help teach them some of the basics so they can play along. But by the end of the summer, they're going to be much more confident in playing keyboard. And that's my story with guitar. Even my first summer as a counselor, we had like 6 counselors playing guitar at campfires. And, 2 of them were really good, and they were the leaders, of course. And they led all the songs, and the rest of us just kind of stood around and played along.
Yeah.
And if I messed up, it didn't matter. Nobody knew. And I could just start playing again when I figured it out. And but by the end of the summer, I was confident enough to like lead the worship at a day camp or at a campfire. And just a great leadership, nurturing environment.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and just it's like given space for people to play a little bit. That's good. That's good. So what is the best thing you got going right now that you're doing right now, either with your processes or practices or at camp?
That's really hard. We have a lot of great programs, and it's hard to say one of them is, the best thing. We run 6 weeks of family camp every summer at Okoboji, where the whole family comes from Sunday to Friday for vacation. And that is just so sweet to see families interact with each other in this environment where they don't have to worry about cooking. They don't have to worry about cleaning. They don't have to worry about social media, or they don't have to worry about schedules or practices or anything. Like, they just get to be together. It's just uninterrupted family time. And there's time for kids to be with the other kids their age, and the adults to just have some time with the other adults. But, it's just great family time. And that's really special, I think, more because it feels more rare now in our society, that you see families spending that much time just together.
Yeah. Well, I'll plug. Let me plug that for a second, because I tried it, and somebody's like, "Wait, how far are you going up for camp?" Like, because from here to there is a pretty long drive. But thinking like, and I just say to people, like, imagine a camp experience. Imagine your whole family at a camp experience. And just doing all the camp together as a family without like you said, without all the worries about cooking, cleaning, like it's just everything's taken care of. And like, hey, look, there's a fun event going to happen. There's this craft you can do together, like, and then having the regular things that are, that happen at camp. But then all of a sudden, like, hey, this year, guess what? We've got an escape room that we planned on. Like, hey, this is awesome. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And so like doing that as a family where, maybe you don't have, because of, busyness and stuff, you're not spending that time together, but like you've made this commitment to be together and experience camp together. And it's like, it's so, and like that my kids are saying, hey, are we going to camp? Like that's the fun part. They want to, and they want to do it as a family. That's the fun.
Well, we have, I can't tell you how many times, because it's more than a handful, maybe more than 2 handfuls, where a family has come to camp for the first time or the second time, and they really enjoy it, and they're talking with their family kind of on the way home, and they're saying, well, that was great. What do you guys want to do next year? Like, do you want to go to Yellowstone or Disney? And they're like, I remember one family specifically, they said that, and the kids were like, yeah. And then somehow they found out that meant they wouldn't do camp. Like, it was an either or thing. And they were like, oh no, we have to go to camp.
Yeah.
That means we can't go to Disney. Okay, we want to go to camp. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's awesome. That's so great. And it speaks to the value of that time together. I remember there was a Facebook video of interviewing kids. and they asked them a bunch of funny questions. And at the end, one of the questions was, if you could have lunch with anyone in the whole world, who would it be? And it was like tear jerking even to see how many of the kids just said, my mom, my dad, and it was just like, what? Like how special parents are to their kids and how impactful or whatever they are that they don't even realize.
Yeah.
And this time together is so valuable. You couldn't even put a dollar amount on it, but we do, because you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a pretty great thing.
Yeah.
We have youth camps. Our day camps partnering with churches are exploding. Last summer, we had to say sorry to 10 churches that we couldn't staff day camp teams to go to their churches. And a lot of the churches that bring our teams of counselors to do their VBS say they just love the energy that the camp brings with the curriculum, and they bring that taste of camp to church. So they love that too. And we have a lot of great programs throughout the year, even for adults.
Yeah.
That are really exciting. For me personally, I think what we were talking about at the beginning is one of the most exciting things for me, is watching young adults come into camp and just gain this whole new sense of identity of who they are as Christians and who they are in their own skin, like their gifts and talents. And they meet some really solid friends that often are lifelong friends. And watching them grow up to be involved in the church, whether it's in ministry jobs or whether it's as a parent that's willing to teach Sunday school or be a confirmation leader or whatever. So I think for me, that's one of the most personally exciting things is the development of these campers into counselors, into leaders in the church.
Yeah. So, and this is another question too, because camp is so fun and all the great things that are happening there. But how do you balance? Because you're also teaching some serious. I mean, there's something where there's some kid that is making a commitment, right? That hey, hadn't thought about that. Just went for a good time. All of a sudden, he's thinking about things and thinking about his relationship with Christ and making a commitment. And so, being preparing kids to, counselors for doing skits and things like that. But all of a sudden, hey, this kid's having a moment. How do you best support? So how do you balance that, the fun and the serious?
Yeah. I remember when I was, kind of first a counselor, and, the word mature, to me, mature was equivalent of serious.
Yeah.
And then there was the goofy fun, and so grow up or, get more mature. But I think my definition of mature changed at camp to be something like being mature is knowing when to be fun and silly and knowing when to be serious, if you want to use that word, as an opposite. But the thing about camp is it's all of both of those things. It's that you can't really separate them. Yeah, sure. In the schedule, there's going to be the games and activities where we run around and chase kids with socks, and tag them and that kind of stuff. And there's going to be dodgeball and there's going to be goofy things too, skits. And there's going to be some what you call serious moments, the drama that we watch, the messages that are shared and the Bible studies that are there. And I think one of the things that makes camp so meaningful is that it has all of both of those things in a day. It's the unfortunate thing, I'm thinking church world. Yeah. When you have kids in Sunday school, you have them for 45 minutes, on a Sunday morning, and you have a lesson that you're trying to get through. And so that's really what Sunday school is even by nature of the name, Sunday school. It's cool. Coming to learn, as if learning was the ultimate goal. And even in church, sometimes there can just be this, it's serious. So you get this mentality that you go to church, you got to sit and listen, and then you got to sit and worship and listen, and then you go home, and then it's kind of a disconnect. But at camp, all the worlds come together. And in fact, our core values, are a big part of shaping our camp experience. And one of them is playful, loving Christian community.
Yeah.
Like, we want kids to have fun. And so much brain research has been done about how, the direction that the brain processes things.
Yeah.
And the first thing that has to be addressed is this safety, like fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And so we always say safety is the most important thing. You might think it's Jesus, but at camp, right? But actually safety is the most important, because if that's not there, nothing you say in Bible study is going to matter. They're going to still be this like, am I safe? And that also goes kind of the sense of belonging, like it's like emotionally safe. Do they feel like they're connected to the community? So that's what we talk about with our counselors. First, the campers have to be safe and feel safe. And secondly, they have to feel connected, like emotionally safe in this place. Then you start to get into the part of your brain where you can process ideas and thoughts and Bible studies and identity stuff and reflect. And so much of that safety comes through play.
Yeah.
The relational safety, the sense of belonging. Man, Sunday school teachers, youth leaders, they might at best get like 2 hours a week with their kids, maybe a Sunday, maybe a Wednesday, maybe a lock-in, which adds more. But when you add that up over the span of a year, it's like a little over 100 hours.
Mm-hmm.
A week of camp is all of that and a little more. And you're with each other all throughout the day. So your counselor, you're eating breakfast with them. You're going to worship with them. You're playing dodgeball with them. You're having Bible study with them. You're swimming in the lake. You're brushing your teeth. It's like, so a counselor cannot fake it for 24 hours a day, 6 days in a row.
Right.
And so we tell them, don't even try to fake it. You're not perfect. And but you love Jesus, and you should love these kids. And when they see that, their walls are going to come down, and they're going to be open to they're going to believe what you have to say, because they see every part of your life for these 6 days.
Yeah.
So I think the balance of fun and serious is really not so much a balance as a marriage of the two.
Right.
And I think that's what makes camp such a special environment.
Yeah. And I know, like, a school environment is not the same as a camp environment, but still, like, I wish, to take what you just said about the, safety and belonging and play, and like, one that was worth the price of admission here. Thanks, Dan. That was like, be a call out there. But just like, embracing that a little bit. And like, yeah, there is some boundaries, but like when you're asking, students to, like, we're just talking about math, like one of the number one standard for mathematical practice for math is to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Persevere means struggle. Struggle means like, hey, I'm not going to struggle if I don't feel safe, if I don't feel I belong, like, because there's some, insecurity there that's happening. And so being able to like create an environment for that to happen. And so like thinking about what have I done to establish that? Or am I just saying, hey, do this, and I haven't laid that groundwork yet? That's not gonna work. So I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
Well, I have a quick story from my student teaching about that. I did 7th grade math for 7 weeks.
Oh, beautiful.
And I every Friday, the last 10 minutes of the period it was a writing prompt. And I know I'm in math class, but this writing prompt was mostly to help me get to know the kids. And the first Friday I did it, I just said, okay, here's your writing prompt, my favorites. And they said, like, my favorite what? And I'm like, you tell me. You just list whatever things you want to tell me, and then write your favorites. And I got to know like their favorite vacation spot or their favorite movie. And all of a sudden, like, I even wrote back a couple of comments on it and then gave it back to them and said, oh, I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. And then the next week I said, the prompt was my family. Okay, well, they just told me whatever they wanted about their family. I didn't ask anything else. That's all I said. And then, but there was one boy in particular who wore these T-shirts. They were the band Kiss. They were like these button-up, full, color pictures of it. And he wore them like every week, which partly says something too about his situation at home. But I remember he loved the band Kiss and he struggled with math. Mm-hmm. So every day I had a problem on the board that they would work on while they were coming into class. And it was either like a review of yesterday or kind of a transition into what we were going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking about this kid, and I wrote out this story problem. And I said, okay, the band Kiss is coming to Sioux Falls. They're doing a concert and they're setting up their speakers, and they need to have 180 degrees. We're doing angles and stuff. Awesome. And each speaker has a 60 degree, array or spread. How many speakers do they need to cover? So they just had to do some simple angle math and things.
Yeah.
But the kid, I remember he sits down in his chair and he looks up at the board, and I was watching him. He looks up at the board, he reads the problem. He turns around and looks at me. He turns around and looks at the board, and then he looks at me again. He says, "Did you do that just for me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." Yeah. And he was like, "Cool."
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But it's fun. And I shared that story because even in a school environment, like anything you can do to cross the bridge of relationship and build that trust, that's what we do at camp through fun and play. At school, there's a little bit of that at recess or PE or whatever, but for the most part, like that happens in the classroom. And frankly, it is important to make the most of the time you have in the classroom for education. But anything you can do to build that relationship of trust is going to help those walls come down and those kids feel safe. And then they're going to be more open to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that's pretty good. Well, I'll ask this one, and maybe it's something different. So as anyone, we're thinking about on Abaddon Planet, we like to think about teaching better. So, you're an experienced educator. And so what is the best thing you've learned to help you be a better teacher?
Honestly, I probably jumped the gun on what I shared before, but that's okay. That's probably the biggest thing is the relationships. And when I remember being an education major working on staff in the summers, and I would learn a lot of the theories in school, but at camp I would learn what works.
Yeah.
Like I was able to just be with the kids and simple things like attention getters. Okay, so you're in a classroom.
Yeah.
And you got the classic turn off the lights if the kids are being too loud.
Yeah.
And then tell them to quiet down. Or you put marks on the chalkboard, and if they get too many marks, they don't get a sticker, or they don't get to go to recess. I mean, that kind of stuff. And at camp, learning a little technique of like, if you can hear my voice, clap once. And then the 4 people around you will clap. And then everyone kind of stops and turns like, why are all these people? Oh. And all of a sudden you have their attention. You never had to yell. You never had to put them down. But a lot of it's just practical things that helped me engage with people. Yeah. It wasn't so much the teaching theories or things like that, but it was at camp, it really helped me to see how to work with people and value people. And the content will come, and you're going to, as a teacher, I know you have to scaffold all over the place to get this whole classroom of kids that's all across the spectrum, and you're supposed to teach this one thing. And so you're going to have to spend time more with one kid than another, and might not seem fair, but you want to be equitable in what you do. You want to help everyone have the best chance of success.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to throw one back at you. I think one of I've learned a lot of things, and actually the camp has been a topic on this podcast more than once. I mean, even we were talking about, I think one of our counselors at family camp, Taylor, I think his name is Taylor, like talked about this like year of discipleship he did. And so like, I've done that where we're in I did that with my oldest, and now with Noah, and going through that with Annie, and I'll be doing it with Jack. Just like, kind of like, that was like, hey, that's this is a pretty good kid. I'm going to do something like that because like he's turned out well.
Yeah.
And anyway, but the thing that I wanted to point out was, there's an expectation with camp, and just like, I think about like, people with less, I got a lot of teachers and they're thinking about lesson planning and they're thinking about all these different creative things, but there's something comfortable about the regularity of camp. Not that camp is the same every single year, but there's like expectations, like, there's the shares that happen that I know when the campfire, I know when I'm going to get a s'more. Usually I can almost schedule it out. I know when, that Dan is going to share his, this finger story. Like, and like the finger trick and like, or I'm going to hear certain things, or like there's going to a chance to do, we're going to play bonkers. But there's this expectation, but then within that, like there's the structure, but then there's the creativity that happens within it. Right. And so, and even talking about the call and response thing, like having ways that, you capture your students' attention that are regular, but it becomes like, hey, that's the identity. That's our class. Like that's the identity of it, or that's the identity of camp. Like that's what it means to be in camp. That's what it means to be in my class. And like embracing some of those things, even if like they seem, like I was like it seems kind of uncool right now, but no, that uncoolness becomes part of what is cool about being in that class. Like this is what we do. This is the thing. Like I've never given a test. I've always given a celebration. We do celebrations of learning. And so, and that came from my cooperating teacher. And so that became like the identity of my class. And like, something like celebration and like by the end, I'm like, yeah, we're celebrating our learning. Like, just become something like that. So
totally.
But I appreciate your time, Dan. I think I've taken more than I said I would, but
this is great.
Lots of great sharing and things, but, and you did talk about some of your programs, and we can put the website on our show notes here, but anything that you want to promote going forth?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's really like three things that I can think of. One is signing up for camp. If you think this is an experience you want, you could bring a group of kids to a high school week or a junior high week, or bring your family to family camp. It's a wonderful summer getaway at the lakes. Also, just putting in the plug is applying for summer staff. And it's very likely that most of the people listening won't be applying for summer staff.
Right.
But they know someone.
Yeah.
They know some high school junior or senior, or they know some college student that would be great at camp. They're really good with kids. They're, involved in church or campus ministry or something like that. And your personal encouragement to say, hey, I heard this weird guy on a podcast and he talked about working at camp. It sounded pretty amazing. You should check it out. So it's just our website, okoboji.org/apply. And you can find out a lot more about working at camp and apply right online there. And then the last thing that's just really exciting is that in 2024, Ingham Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camps will be celebrating 100 years of ministry.
Oh, wow.
So the camp, Okoboji Lutheran Bible Camp, was founded in 1924. And then along the way, joined with Ingham Lake Bible Camp, and now we operate one ministry running two camps. And so we're celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2024. So there's going to be a fun year full of celebration and just amazing God's faithfulness in this ministry through the century. Really.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. Yeah. Well, and I'll do another plug for any teachers or to be teachers out there. I mean, I remember when I did day camp all through my college, and like I felt so confident. Give me a room with 20 kids and an hour, like I'll be fine. I'll be just fine. Where that could terrify some people. Like I'll be camping. Camp prepared me. So
it's one of the best opportunities for education majors, especially.
Oh, absolutely.
But we have counselors that are all kinds of majors as well, and some that aren't even in college, but they're working and they just took a summer off to do this. So excellent.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you and all you do up at camp.
Joel, thanks for having me on today. This is really fun.
All right. Hey, that's a fun conversation. I mean, we even talked about a little bit about theory in there, a little bit educational theory and how it can apply and think about play and all that. I was good. I was really happy with that episode. Is exactly, like you have a vision for the conversation. And sometimes, I ask people to be on the podcast, like kind of when, I asked Rob Harvella to be on the podcast, he's like, really? You want to talk about teaching? I'm a rock critic and that has a podcast about the 90s and music, and like, you really want to have a conversation? And maybe it's similar with Dan, like what are we doing here? What are we talking about? And we talk about learning how to teach better. And again, we can find how to learn how to teach better in various spaces. And again, that's why I wanted to start this podcast, is to talk about kind of these non-traditional sources for learning how to teach better. And again, we tap into traditional sources as well. Like thinking about our conversation with Mandy Jansen about rough draft math and some of the other things that we've done. But I don't know, I kind of like doing these like maybe outside the box a little bit, but it wasn't too outside the box. Again, Dan's got a lot of background in education and thinks pretty deeply about it, and also has like a what works sort of mindset. I like that. So, all right, now I want to jump into the mailbag real quick. I had a comment happen in class that's a question I get a lot when people learn like what I do, and thinking about, teaching math and also teaching teachers that teach math. And like, so I had a question about like this, and it's a question I've heard over and over again. So perfect for the mailbag. And this also goes for, folks that are entering into, young kids that are entering in elementary school, and you get like, I don't understand this math. And so, question I get often is something to this effect is, does it matter how my kid solves a math problem? Because we have ways, right? We have these ways that we know how to solve. Like, I've got the standard algorithm. It's worked for me, and I know how to use it, and I can show my kid how to use it. And why can't they just do it that way? All right. First, algorithms and methods for solving a problem. We want to open up ways, and this is for any teacher also too. We want kids to solve problems in a number of different ways, and to see it. And like, it's not about just getting the answer. Yes, we want our kids to be able to have accurate answers. That, yes, we do want that. But we want them to explore different methods, right? And it's not about efficiency at first, okay? It eventually gets to efficient, but we want it to be about understanding, all right? We want them to understand what they're doing. And here's a quick question, like, when you're doing like a standard algorithm for multiplying two-digit numbers, and you multiply that first number by both the units number and the second on the bottom number, you multiply that by the units on the top number, and then you multiply it by the tens digit in the top number, and then so you get those answers, and then you go down to the next row, and in a standard algorithm, you move over. Can you explain why you move over, right? Can you explain why you move over? Does that make sense to you? Or you just know, I just do it, and when I'm done, it's the same product that I would get as if I did it in the calculator, right? And so sometimes, you think about it, we've done these algorithms, or even like the subtraction algorithm where you borrow and stuff like that. Do you know why you're doing that? Or you just do it without thinking. We want our kids to understand why things work, right? And so you want a kid to like model a subtraction problem with base 10 blocks, where that borrowing becomes, hey, I'm turning this unit of tens into 10 singles, right? 10 individual units, right? So I have 110, and that 110 becomes 10 single units. That's important in order to, again, to gain that understanding. It's not efficient, right? Efficient would be just drill into the algorithm, but rather like showing them how to separate it out. So another way, and you're thinking about like knowing your facts, right? Knowing your number facts. And so the idea of like, if I'm going to add 6 plus 5 together, right? So if I'm going to add 6 plus 5 together, a lot of people out there are like, well, that's 11, right? We just know it, right? It's a fact. We know that it's 11. We've got it. If you showed it on a flashcard, boom, we've got that one down. So for a kid that's just learning what it means to add, if you showed them a flashcard, or just learning to add, not only just learning to add, but just learning numerals, and thinking that the numeral 6, right, is some made up symbol that represents a quantity of 6 things, right? And that the numeral 5, again, another made up symbol that we're saying is one less than the other made up symbol. And again, we've structured that. Like kids have to learn that those symbols actually have some sort of meaning. That's not automatic. It wasn't automatic for you either, right? And so thinking like, I need to know that 5 is 5 individuals. So first for a kid is just doing the translation. Like, oh yeah, that's 6. That 6 means 6 individual units. They might count it out. Count out 6 things, like 6 counters, 6 chips, right? Or 6 blocks. They count that out, and then they see the 5, and they count out the 5. And then they push those things together, and then they count them out again. And just counting is another skill where I got to know the names, right? These made-up names that we've created, right? So 1, 2, 3, those are all made-up names, and we need to know that those are connected to a quantity. And so I need to know the names. I need to know one-to-one correspondence. So when I point to 1 or touch 1, that I've counted it, it's been counted, so I slide it maybe. So I've got that. And then I also have to know cardinality, that when whatever the one I stop at, so I stop at 11, I've counted each of them. I slid them over maybe to make sure I know that they're counted. I know that when I slide the last one over, it's 11, that 11 is how many items that I have. And that quantity of 11 items represents the word 11, but then also represents the symbol for 11, which would be the 2 numerals 1, 1, right? For 1, 10, and 1 single, right? Or 1 unit. So there's a lot there, right? So that's one thing, one way to do it. That's called direct modeling. Another way to do it would be to maybe count on, right? So if I'm adding 5 plus 6, I might say, okay, I know I've got 5. In my head, I got 5. And then so maybe I count out, 6 objects, and say, okay, 5. And then I go, 6, 7, so I'm counting on the 6 beyond my 5. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'm sliding things on the desk that you can't see, but just imagine that. So I'm counting on, right? I'm counting on so if I'm 5 plus 6, I'm counting on from the first number I heard. Oh, I heard 5. I got 5 in my head. Now I'm counting on 6. Now, one level of sophistication beyond that. So we've got direct modeling where we count out them all, put them together, count them all out after that. That's one level of sophistication. Another level could be to count on from the first number. Another level of sophistication could be like the kid's like, ooh, 6 is bigger than 5. So I'm going to start with the bigger number, 6, and then count on 5 from there. And then I can use my counter that I have with me at all times, my right hand. And so I know I'm going to add 5 more onto 6. So I got 6 in my head. All right, 7, and I'm pointing each of my fingers, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? So do that. And then on from there, I might have some other strategies. Like, ooh, I know 5 plus 5 is 10, and 6 is 1 more than 5, so I get 11. Or I know 6 plus 6 is 12 because I know a dozen eggs, because we cook eggs all the time in my house, and I see a dozen eggs, and I know a dozen is 12, and I see a 6 and 6, and sometimes I see 6 and 1 egg is away because it was cracked or broken or like we used it, so I see 6 and 5. I know that that's 1 less than 12, which is 11. Right? So those are kind of these impromptu strategies that kids might have to use. And so that gets them to it until finally they know 6 plus 5 is 11. Okay? That's a lot of steps to get to the flashcard fact that 6 plus 5 is 11. A lot of times we just skip over all of that to get to the 6 plus 5. So when it says, does it matter how my kid solves a problem? Yeah, it does. But we want to make sure that we have opportunities to advance. And so, from what I would do is and this is what I have done when I'm in, like a kindergarten or first grade classroom where we're doing problems like that, is have kids solve it and then have kids share their methods. Like, oh, you counted all of them out and then counted them all up. All right, fantastic. Another kid counted on and another kid counted on from the larger one. And they do these different strategies. And they're like, hey, we're going to do another one. Why don't you try somebody else's strategy, right? Or try and name them, like, hey, try Bill's strategy or try Juan's strategy or whatever, right? Ask them to, name a strategy after a kid and have them try that. One, that gives kids ownership. They get a little bit of pride. And now we're trying to advance their strategies down the path to eventually where they do know that like 6 plus 5 is 11. Or then going back to the original point of thinking about like these standard algorithms where, again, maybe if the objective is to learn the standard algorithm, yeah, so maybe they need to use the standard algorithm. But if it's not, there's other methods that kids can use that help them gain understanding. Yes, eventually the standard algorithm has some efficiencies to it. We want to expose them to it and we want them to know it and so they can understand it. But we want to make sure that there's comprehension of what they're doing, right? Because a lot of times we're just regurgitating things. It took me until I was a teacher of mathematics to understand, thinking about regurgitating, is that there was a connection between the distance formula and the Pythagorean theorem. Like, I didn't really realize that. Maybe you didn't realize that. But it is. It's basically, the distance formula is basically the Pythagorean theorem. And I didn't realize it. And so, like, there's like these connections that exist out there that we could be using to help kids gain understanding, to make sure that they see what they're doing, right? They have an understanding of what they're doing. Math is not magical, it's logical. Okay, so if you're stressed out about a way a kid's doing, like, hey, just let's try to make sense of it together. Let's make sense of what we're trying to do. And that in and of itself, one, that's a good bonding experience with a kid, and also two, that's a way to help get at the point of let's focus in on the understanding. Right? Focus in on the understanding. So there's a mailbag. Maybe that's not a mailbag. Maybe that's more of a rant, but there it is. Okay. All right. So we had a great conversation with Dan Antoine. We had a mailbag about, hey, how's kids solve a problem? What am I concerned about? Again, thinking about what's the point. If the point is to actually learn that specific way of solving the problem, that's great. But otherwise, hey, let's let them solve it in a variety of ways and just make sure that there's understanding about how they're doing it and that they understand how they're doing it. Okay. All right. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Amazon Planet podcast. Show notes can be found at amazonplanet.com/episode 81. Now, for those of you looking for ways to support the podcast, you can submit a question, comment, or suggestion to the mailbag by sending an email to joel@amazonplanet.com. You can also support by subscribing, rating, or reviewing, and sharing this episode, which will allow more people looking for similar content to find it. As always, you can follow at Amazon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amazon Planet Facebook page. All right. Thanks for spending time on Amazon Planet. Thanks to Dan Antoine for sharing his time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you've been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.